Exciting. A man named Stephen, a full-time hunter and gourmet, hunted a black bear and obtained quality bear meat. He rendered the fat into oil and cooked the loin in it, enjoying a hearty meal. Stephen is now in southwestern Wisconsin, where his friend Doug runs a farm. The area is overrun with white-tailed deer, affecting the growth of oak saplings. Thus, Doug hunts several mature deer annually to control their population, ensuring the farm's sustainable development. With the hunting season 2 days away and a storm predicted, Stephen and Doug scout locations. They must prepare before 2 apprentices arrive. A critical part of the preparation is ensuring deer presence, so Doug has set up a homemade bait device filled with juice in a tree to attract deer using their keen sense of smell. Although deer are the main target, Stephen wants the apprentices to enjoy themselves. He plans to set beaver traps by the river in case the deer hunt fails. He sets traps along the beavers' paths using branches to guide them into the traps, and will check back in a day or 2. The following morning, Stephen and Doug throw duck decoys into the river. After a wait, wild ducks appear, and the men quickly shoot, spectacularly bringing down several ducks. Duck is one of Stephen's favorite dishes. Stephen prepares the ducks for a beer duck recipe using strong beer, maple syrup, brown sugar, cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg. After the sauce thickens, he sets it aside, then fries the duck until golden before finishing it in the oven. When the apprentices, former comedians who once enjoyed deer hunting in Montana, finally arrive, the duck is almost done. Stephen serves the sliced duck beautifully and tops it with the sauce. The group enjoys the meal and conversation, creating a joyful scene. After dinner, Doug gives the apprentices commemorative hats and discusses the next day's plan. Stephen and Joy will wait at the first canyon exit, while the others go to a ridge hunting spot. They position themselves early the next morning. Stephen and Joy watch the valley exit, waiting for deer. A fawn appears followed by more deer, but none are deemed worthy of pursuit, so they decide to wait longer. Meanwhile, Doug and Brian, stationed half a mile away, have not seen any deer. Brian's constant talking annoys Doug, but a deer's appearance interrupts them. Brian takes aim at a beautiful doe, shoots, and successfully makes his first kill. Elsewhere, Stephen and Joy were patiently waiting when a young buck strutted by. Although Joy, as a guest, was allowed to hunt a young deer, he chose to adhere to the local hunting rules and let the buck pass. However, the buck lingered around them, eventually attracting another young deer. This sparked Joy's desire to shoot, and Stephen encouraged him to take the shot. Joy fired, and the buck ran a short distance before stumbling and falling. They approached and found it was only 1.5 years old. This was Joy's first white-tailed deer hunt, which excited him greatly. Meanwhile, Brian had shot a mature doe. Both hunters had made their first kills, and Stephen shared the joy of deer hunting with the apprentices. Each had bagged a deer, raising spirits to a high point. The experience wasn't over yet. Due to an overpopulation of deer, farm owner Doug planned to cull several more to protect the ecological balance, providing good news for Stephen and the others. At 3 p.m, Stephen and Joy searched for a suitable doe. They spotted one feeding in a cornfield, but Stephen, observing through the naked eye, deemed it too light, weighing no more than 50 pounds. Another doe appeared to the right, and Stephen whistled to catch its attention. Joy took a decisive shot, but his aim was poor, and both does fled like the wind. Joy wanted to take another shot but lost sight of them. After a short wait, a doe reappeared and Joy fired again, confident he had hit the target. Stephen observed that the doe did not reappear and likely lay down somewhere below, but they decided to wait a bit longer for caution. Meanwhile, Doug and Brian sat in a stand, waiting for a stroke of luck. Boredom set in, and Brian fell into a chatty mode, which Doug, now more accustomed, managed to tolerate. 2 does appeared, interrupting their conversation, including a mature one moving downhill. Joy was ready and shot the doe in the heart as it paused, instantly dropping it. Doug couldn't help but praise the shot, boosting Brian's spirits. Their luck continued as another deer appeared on the ridge, and this time, Doug took the shot as the deer showed its head. They went to check the first deer, a mature doe lying in a pool of blood. Doug checked his shot and followed blood traces to find the second doe, also dead. The pair returned with a full haul. Meanwhile, Stephen and Joy set off to track their quarry. They found bone fragments at the scene, indicating a hit, but no blood suggested a leg shot, complicating things. The deer might not have died, or could have run far before collapsing. With darkness setting in, they planned to resume the search the next day. The busy work wasn't over. They brought the 4 deer hunted over 2 days back to the farm. Before the bodies stiffened, they butchered the deer, which were fat and covered in thick fat. After skinning, they brought the deer inside for slaughter, packaged the different cuts, and prepared them for sale in stores. The high-quality venison was much loved by customers. The next morning, they resumed their hunting efforts. Despite Stephen being preoccupied with thoughts of the doe that got away, they had to wait as the early hours are prime for hunting. Unfortunately, they had no luck until the sun rose higher. They then set out to find the injured doe and discovered a bloodstain on the ground. Following the trail for a long distance, they still couldn't find the doe. Joy was filled with self-blame. Missing a clean kill meant the animal could be suffering, a terrible feeling for any hunter. As they proceeded, the blood trail showed no significant changes. After 4 hours and no sight of the doe, Joy began to cry. Stephen comforted him, explaining that such experiences are part of a hunter's growth. He advised that in future hunts, one should only shoot when confident of a clean kill. Unable to locate the doe, they had no choice but to return home. Their experience lesson was ending the next day, and Stephen thought about hosting a lavish dinner. He first checked the beaver traps by the river, finding one small frozen beaver and another larger one trapped. The favorite local dish is beaver tail, which is cooked by the fire until it bubbles and shrinks, then peeled to reveal rich fat. While Stephen prepared dinner, the others tried their luck in the cornfield, but saw nothing by evening, so they returned for dinner. Stephen prepared 2 dishes, a deer head seasoned with salt and pepper, rubbed with olive oil, added to chicken broth, wrapped in foil, and roasted for hours. The second dish was braised beaver ham with potatoes, carrots, mushrooms, and onions. After sautéing the vegetables, he coated the beaver meat in flour, browned it, added it to the vegetables, poured in some cooking cream, and simmered for an hour or 2. By nightfall, dinner was ready, and it was thoroughly enjoyed, making for a pleasant evening. Months later, Stephen visited the Cumberland Canyon in the Rocky Mountains to hunt an elk. Due to overhunting in the 19th century, elk populations nearly vanished but were restored thanks to conservation efforts. Early in the morning, Stephen moved through the woods, listening to nature and seeking elk, usually found sleeping on ridges. He noticed the barn-like smell typical of elk bedding areas and successfully located an elk home. As he admired the view, he locked eyes with an elk. The bull elk was angry at the intrusion but chose to flee rather than confront Stephen. This young bull was not Stephen's intended target, so it escaped. Reflecting on the beautiful creature, Stephen thought back to the American Revolutionary War era when elk were widespread. However, Western expansion led to significant wildlife slaughter. Conservationists have long worked to correct ancestral mistakes by reintroducing species in the late 20th century, including efforts by the Elk Foundation. They host annual summer camps, study, and decide who gets the coveted hunting spots. Stephen also visited Bill, the local head, who deepened his understanding of elk history. The next day, Stephen embarked on another hunting trip. Being his first time in this area, he was unfamiliar with the surroundings. Fortunately, his extensive tracking experience soon led him to discover elk droppings among the dry leaves and rubbing marks on nearby trees, signs that this was an elk habitat. Excited, Stephen paid close attention to every detail, the beautiful sounds of the forest lifting his spirits. As he reached the top of another ridge, signs of elk became more frequent. He felt a bull elk was nearby, loaded his rifle, and soon, a bull appeared right in front of him. The proximity startled Stephen a bit, and the highly alert elk bolted in a flash, causing Stephen to miss his chance. As dusk fell, he ended his day's journey. The following morning, Stephen returned to the ridge to continue searching for elk. A gentle breeze and the beautiful scenery lifted his spirits. Over time, he finally heard the call of a bull elk and followed the sound, which guided him in the right direction. Unfortunately, despite the elk calls continuing until dusk, Stephen couldn't catch up to the animal. He marked this location, planning to try his luck again the next day. The next day, the temperature dropped slightly, which could affect the hunt. Stephen climbed the ridge again, searching for any signs of elk. Suddenly, an elk's call echoed from nearby bushes. As he approached, he could smell the elk, and the sound seemed to come from the ridge below. Stephen moved quietly, minimizing noise, and once close enough, he crawled on his knees and caught a glimpse of the elk. He raised his gun, took aim, and fired, feeling he had hit the target. Carefully confirming the elk was hit, he relaxed. After waiting a moment, he approached and found the elk dead, a large and beautiful creature. With reverence, Stephen admired it before starting to butcher it. He expertly skinned it and cut the meat, hanging it on a tree. After finishing feeling hungry, he gathered some mushrooms from the forest to prepare a meal with the elk's liver. He sliced the liver, cut the mushrooms, heated oil in a pan, cooked the mushrooms until golden, then added the liver. It only took a moment before both were ready. He sprinkled some chili powder on top and tasted it. The flavors of the mushrooms and the tender liver were a delightful combination. Stephen was very satisfied with his hunt. He had hunted a large elk, obtaining nearly 300 pounds of meat. Enjoying a delicious meal with wild mushrooms and the elk's liver, Stephen, a full-time hunter and gourmet, had come to southwestern Colorado to hunt a mule deer. Mule deer, a crossbreed between eastern white-tailed and western black-tailed deer, fascinated him deeply. Accompanied by his friend Nate, also an avid hunter, they set up camp upon arrival and started their hunt early the next morning. The next day, they hadn't gone far before spotting several deer, but these were white-tailed deer, not their target. Mule deer, being larger, require a more expansive habitat and migrate with the seasons. They adapt well to both mountain ridges and bushy desert lowlands. As this was a public hunting ground, encountering other hunters posed a significant challenge to hunting mule deer. Using binoculars, they finally spotted a group of mule deer in motion. Tracking moving prey was almost impossible, so their main task for the day was to scout the area and prepare for the next day. After a day of observation, they had a rough plan. The next morning, they returned, hoping to find a suitable, mature, and large buck. They set up on high ground and began observing through binoculars. They hadn't yet found their target when a competitor appeared first. Needing to take the initiative, they started moving, trying their luck at encountering mule deer. After searching, Stephen found a kill site from the previous day, evidence of another hunter's success, which made him envious and determined to succeed himself. Unfortunately, as the sun set, Stephen felt increasingly disheartened, another day without success. As days passed from the 3rd to the 4th and then the 5th, Stephen began to lose hope, planning to just stick it out for 7 days before returning home. His mood was dominated by frustration. Hunting mule deer seemed cursed, as he always returned empty-handed. This time seemed no different as he ended another day without success. On the 7th day, if there was still no catch, Stephen was ready to head back. Perhaps by fortune, he then spotted several mule deer, including a mature buck, the first suitable one he had seen all week. Excited, Stephen tried to calm himself. Unfortunately, the shooting angle was not ideal, so he moved closer. Luckily, the deer hadn't sensed the danger. He got down, aimed, and waited for the right moment before firing. The buck staggered forward until it collapsed behind a tree. They celebrated briefly before checking the prey. A trail of blood led to a massive deer. Stephen was finally fulfilled. After admiring the deer, he began butchering it, first removing the tarsal glands, which emit scent, and carefully extracting them. He then cut through the pelvis to facilitate removing the organs and proceeded to separate the meat by different parts. The deer looked about 2 to 3 years old, its meat in prime condition. Stephen filled his backpack and began his return journey. Back at camp, they set up a makeshift kitchen. Stephen sliced the loin, chopped it, and did the same with the fat, mixing them together into a patty shape. He then fried it until golden on both sides, topped it with a slice of butter, allowing it to melt, and placed the patty on a slice of bread, adding some sausage, and sandwiching it with another bread slice, creating a homemade burger. This was the essence of sourcing fresh ingredients in the wild. The deer provided various cuts: the hind legs for delicious ham, the shoulder for sausages, and the head for charcoal grilling, each delicious in its own right. Stephen was very satisfied with this hunting trip. A few days later, he arrived in Wisconsin, ready to hunt a turkey and catch some large carp. Accompanied by his good friend Jared, they headed into the wilderness early in the morning to wait for turkeys. Continuous light rain complicated their efforts. Jared kept mimicking turkey calls to attract real ones. Soon they heard turkey calls from behind the ridge and quickly moved into action. Reaching the top of the ridge by noon, they decided to split up. Jared stayed to continue calling, while Stephen positioned himself on the opposite side to create a pincer movement. Unfortunately, no turkeys appeared, but a coyote did, which brought some amusement to Stephen, though it disrupted their plans. Realizing the turkeys were unlikely to show, they decided to end the day's hunt. However, they didn't leave empty-handed. They found wild chives that tasted like a mix of onions and garlic with a hint of woodiness, making an excellent garnish. They picked some for later cooking. By nightfall, Jared's brother-in-law Kevin joined them, and they planned to go bow fishing for large carp. which proved to be a lot of fun. Stephen quickly spotted a fish and speared a large, fat carp with an arrow, opening up a successful fishing session. They joyfully continued, pulling out one big carp after another. The next morning, they returned to the mountain, but the weather was still poor. Jared took cover under a tree while Stephen roamed around, hoping to encounter turkeys. Both were unsuccessful, so they regrouped for a small adventure deeper into the woods. Their decision proved wise, as the sun finally came out and they heard wild turkey calls. They crouched and crept quietly to the edge of the bushes, where Jared used a tool to mimic turkey calls. Stephen focused intently ahead. After a patient wait, a turkey slowly appeared, but seemed to sense something was off and prepared to flee. However, this gave Stephen enough time to shoot. He hit the turkey, and although it struggled, Stephen ran up to it, ready to shoot again, but stopped as it ceased struggling, saving a bullet. He excitedly touched the turkey's feathers, feeling a rush of adrenaline at the moment of the shot, reaching a peak of excitement. Once calmed, they carried the turkey back. Their hunting trip wasn't over yet, as Jared was still eager. The next morning, they returned to wait for turkeys again. Unfortunately, by the time it was fully light, they had not seen any, so they packed up their turkey decoys and headed deeper into the woods. There, they spotted 2 turkeys foraging. They quietly approached, and once close enough, resumed their luring routine. Soon, a turkey walked right into their trap. As it realized the danger, Jared shot, successfully completing his hunt. He narrated the process in a calm tone, but his excitement was evident from his continuous talk. They examined the catch, finding the turkey about 3 years old, in prime condition for meat. Satisfied with their hunt, they were ready to head home and enjoy their delicious catch. A few days earlier, Jared's farm was filled with many friends and family eagerly anticipating Stephen's cooking. The menu featured just 2 items: fried fish fillets and fried chicken. Stephen first processed the fish, slicing it into pieces, then coated each slice in flour. He treated the chicken the same way, soaking both in egg wash before frying them in oil. It wasn't long before the fried chicken and fish were ready. To everyone's surprise, the dishes were exceptionally delicious, and they spent a joyful evening filled with laughter and conversation. A week later, Stephen traveled to Alaska to hunt a black bear, accompanied by his friend Roque, a Navy SEAL commander with extensive combat experience but new to hunting. They flew to a small village in the southern Alaska range, where Buck, a local guide, met them in early June. The area was prone to continuous rain and swarms of mosquitoes, but fortunately, the weather was clear that day, lifting everyone's spirits. Buck detailed the terrain using a map. The next morning, after saying goodbye to Buck, the fully armed pair embarked on a 6-mile hike to the base of a mountain, their planned campsite. They quickly set up a tent and then went to a nearby river to fish for dinner. Despite the enjoyable activity, they caught no fish after several hours and decided to head up to a ridge to find a suitable lookout before nightfall. They spotted a grizzly bear, but only observed it quietly, as hunting was not allowed on their arrival day. The sight of abundant prey nearby thrilled them nonetheless. The next day, they set out early to search for a black bear. As they observed and moved, they found numerous tracks, and Roque, who had been on edge for 14 years, greatly appreciated this rare, relaxing experience. Although they didn't encounter any game that day, the scenic journey excited him. Unfortunately, it wasn't until evening that they saw their first animal of the day, a black bear emerging playfully from a pond. Its comical antics suggested it was enjoying itself like a mischievous child. They watched amusedly, opting not to disturb its fun, and watched it leave before lying down to sleep on the spot. On the 3rd morning, they ventured deeper into the mountains, passing the pond where the black bear had played the previous day. They stopped to rest and unexpectedly saw 2 juvenile grizzly bears, indicating a mature female bear was likely nearby. A dangerous situation. Stephen readied his weapon for any necessary action. They watched the grizzly cubs until they left peacefully, but the incident was a reminder not to wander carelessly. They then chose a specific spot to continue waiting for game. Unfortunately, they caught nothing as dusk fell. On the 4th day, they continued their vigil. By noon, they finally spotted a target and quickly pursued it. Getting closer, Stephen mimicked a predator's call, and the black bear moved towards them. Roque took aim and decisively fired as the bear showed its head. The bear turned and ran. Roque believed he had hit the target. After waiting a while, they approached cautiously and found a blood trail leading to the bear, which lay still nearby, no longer breathing. It was a mature male, exactly what they were looking for. After calming their excitement, they began to process the bear. Using a small knife, they opened the bear's belly, removed the organs, and cut the meat into pieces, packing it into bags before shouldering their backpacks and starting the journey back. Back at camp, Stephen began preparing lunch. He skewered the bear meat and grilled it directly over charcoal. Because high-quality ingredients often require only simple cooking methods, he waited until the meat turned brown, then sprinkled some chili and salt on top before tasting it. The bear meat was chewy and had a mildly spicy flavor, and the two enjoyed it immensely, satisfying their craving. However, the culinary delights didn't end there. Stephen's favorite way to prepare bear meat was by slow cooking. He took a leg bone from the black bear, cut it into sections, coated them with flour, and briefly fried them in oil. Then he added the browned meat to a pot of pre-cooked vegetables, poured in some water, and let it stew for several hours. During this time, they decided to go fishing. The lake was home to many beavers, visible all around as they had settled there. The fishing didn't take long. Stephen was the first to catch a fish, redeeming himself from a previous unsuccessful attempt. Unfortunately, Roque had yet to catch anything. Being considerate, Stephen rowed to the center of the lake, where Roque finally caught a fish, fulfilling his wish. They thoroughly enjoyed the fishing, celebrating their plentiful catch, and were now ready to head home. Stephen went to the garden and picked some silphium, which tasted similar to celery and was particularly good at removing the fishy taste from the meat. He placed the fish on the grill, sprinkled some salt over it, and also grilled the silphium roots alongside. By then, the bear stew was ready to come off the fire, smelling wonderfully aromatic. The fish was also grilled perfectly. They began to savor their meal. The fish was so fresh it almost melted in their mouths, and it tasted delicious. The bear meat was stewed just right, with a flavor that was exceptionally satisfying. Roque was very pleased with the experience of the past few days and deeply appreciated Stephen's assistance. In Alaska's Brooks Range, one of the most remote places on Earth, lives a large species of moose. Stephen arrived by plane, accompanied by his good friend Brent, a waterfowl biologist. Their first task upon arrival was to set up their tent, and then they began scouting the area. According to Alaska's laws, hunting is not allowed on the day of flight, so they spent the day exploring along the lake until dark, then returned to camp. The next morning, they set out officially. It was the mating season for moose, and the bulls were roaming widely in search of mates. They hoped to capitalize on this by using calls to attract the bulls. Soon, realistic-sounding moose calls, created by Brent using a tool, echoed through the wilderness. They also banged branches together to mimic the sound of antlers rubbing, enhancing the deception. If any moose were nearby, they would likely be fooled. Indeed, their calling attracted a response, but not what they expected. A grizzly bear ambled towards them, thwarting their plans. Moose, being highly alert, tend to avoid bears, so the pair decided to relocate and climb a high mountain for a better vantage point. Upon reaching a new location, Stephen spotted 2 moose by the lakeside drinking water, but they were juveniles and not what they were after. They moved around the mountain, but their situation did not improve until the sun was about to set, ending their day's journey. The next day, before resuming their search for moose, they decided to fish for their food. The lake was abundant with pickerel, perfect for frying. After a successful catch, they climbed the highest peak again. Stephen prepared lunch by frying the fish fillets in oil, which sizzled delightfully, and the fish turned out deliciously tender and tasty. Unfortunately, the meal did not bring them luck, and they returned empty-handed as the sun set. Time flew, and soon it was the 6th day with nothing to show. Their initial enthusiasm had waned, but they continued their daily search. Finally, after patient searching, they spotted several moose and quickly pursued them. As they got closer, Stephen made some noise, startling the moose into fleeing. Brent wanted to shoot but felt the timing wasn't right. He mimicked a moose call, momentarily stopping one, but as he aimed again, the moose moved. He tried to repeat the call, but the moose ignored him this time. In his hurry to follow, Brent fell clumsily, missing a great opportunity, which frustrated him greatly. Stephen was also visibly disappointed. It was their only significant chance in 6 days, and they were near tears. After calming their mood, they followed the stream planning to return to camp. Halfway there, they spotted a moose about 2 miles away. Unfortunately, with little daylight left, they could only plan to track it the next day. The following morning, they went to the last seen location, and luckily, the moose was still active nearby. To increase their chances, they split up. Brent headed into the bushes while Stephen kept watch in an open area. Brent moved quietly and soon saw the moose. He set up his rifle and waited until half of the moose was visible before decisively shooting. Startled, the moose quickly disappeared from view, but Brent was confident he had hit his target. The two began searching, but an injured moose can be very dangerous, so they cautiously looked for traces in the grass rather than approaching blindly. They quickly found some fur, but it had no blood on it, suggesting that the bullet might have missed. Brent was very disappointed by this as he likely missed the shot, and with only 2 days left in the hunt, they decided to split up to maximize their chances. Stephen went to a nearby mountaintop to observe the area, while Brent stayed near the camp to continue calling the moose. Fortune favored Stephen as he spotted a mature bull moose, greatly boosting morale. He hurried back to camp but couldn't find Brent, who was also tracking a moose. To avoid disturbing him, Stephen stayed put. After some time, Brent located the moose, but as darkness fell, they had to wait until dawn to continue. At dawn, they resumed their calls, hoping to attract the moose, but after an hour with no sign of it, Stephen moved to higher ground and used binoculars to search. He spotted the moose, but it had moved several miles away. Stephen used an antler to vigorously call it back, and this tactic worked as he saw the moose turn around. He signaled Brent to hurry over, and once reunited, they quickly moved towards the moose, continuing to call it intermittently. Their combined efforts brought the moose within shooting range, a moment they had long awaited. Brent took careful aim and fired when the moose stopped, then shot again as the moose was not yet down. The second shot was decisive, and the moose fell. They approached their prey, relieved to see its robust size, making their week-long wait worthwhile. After a brief rest, they quickly butchered the moose, sorted the meat, and packed everything into 2 kayaks. Floating downstream, they began their journey back. By noon, feeling hungry, they stopped to fish and skewered some of the deer meat and fish to grill over charcoal. After some time, enveloped by delicious aromas, they enjoyed a hearty meal, finding the flavors exceptionally satisfying. This hunting trip ended perfectly, marking a successful and fulfilling adventure.